cloud. And then we'll do a highlight, spotlight for everybody. So we can start talking about the pattern for today, which is this guy here. And this is the infamous Xmas Chronie. The pattern was developed by a fellow who is a part-time guide in Edmonton, known as Doc. And I've been out with him a couple of times. He showed me how to fish a washing line, which you can't do here in BC without pissing around a lot. But this was one of his favorite patterns. He called it a Xmas Chronie because of the colors. The reason that it works and why it's an effective pattern for nymph fishing is that when a chironomid comes off through its life cycle, their eggs that are laid in the water body, and they go down to the bottom, and the first stage of the insect is a larva. And in Alberta, you can get these bloodworms, and they're can be up to 3 or 4 inches long. And in some of the lakes, they're smaller, of course, depends on the species of chironomid. And then the larva becomes a pupa. It's like a caterpillar that starts off as an egg and becomes a caterpillar, and then it pupates and it goes into a little chrysalis form, and that's where it develops the adult butterfly. Well, in the case of midges, which is what these things are, they start off as a worm, and then they turn into a pupa before they hatch. And when they start getting ready to hatch, they start pulling their bodies up inside that nymphal shell, and they leave a little bit of stuff behind that's the same color as the bloodworm. And they're called bloodworms because they have iron in the blood of them, which makes them red. Red. So that red is the remaining larval insect. This is the developing pupa. And this would be the wing case of the adult. And the bead is simply to get it to hang down. And as we talked, I think last week a bit, about taking slack out of the rig when you're fishing with an indicator, it's the bead that helps take that slack out of the indicator so you can actually detect the strikes. So that's the basis of the Xmas Chronomid, because it's Christmas colors. I'm going to take a hook and I'm going to tie it on a size 10 so you guys can see what's going on. I think there are some chironomids that are that size, so you can probably use ones this big. On this one, I've got I didn't have a big enough bead for size 10 in black, so this is one of these plummeting tungsten beads in a 1/8, so it's nice and hefty. For the smaller ones, I use these guys. They're a 7/64 black, again tungsten. And the hooks I'm using, I like these chironomid patterns to be a little longer in the body than short. So I use in my box here, this is my collection of TMCO 200 Rs, and R stands for ring eye. And they're a fairly long shank nymph hook with a little bend at the bat, a bend down at the back. If you can't get those, these are the other ones you can use. They have a shorter shank. They're a TMCO. What is it? It's 2302. But that's a downturned eye, and the shank's a little shorter. So I like the little longer shank. And I would tie these. This is a 10. There's a 12. There's a 12. There's a 12. There's a 14. And there's a 16. So you can tie them in different sizes. And they all look the same, just different sizes. And how do you tell what size to fish? If you happen to be on the lake when there's a hatch going on, you look at the surface of the water, you'll see the the empty nymphal shuck on the surface. And that's the pupa. So if you want to know how big the next size down is as you go down in the water, you want to take the next one that's almost twice the size of that. And then if you're going to use a bloodworm for that one, you got to get 4 times the size of that. They tend to reduce in size by about half through every one of those stages. And then, of course, the midge ends up being a little teeny thing like that. So this is a 10. And for 10, I'm going to use a little heftier thread. This is 6/0 black. And I'll start right behind the bead. Pardon, get a few wraps. And then, pardon me, I'm going to trim off the excess there. I need a rib. So I have some fine gold wire for the rib. And I'll pull a bit off the spool, however much I think I need. I'm not using the spool keepers because these are quite small spools and I don't have ones that are small enough for this. So I'm going to just take some wire off, and I want to leave it long enough that I can handle it by hand or with my hackle pliers. So I'm just going to take that off the spool. I'll take the end of the wire and I'll just shove it in the back of the bead and wrap down on top of it. And I'm going to wrap down the whole length of the shank of the hook, pulling the wire out from the shank a little bit and off to the side away from me. And I'll use, that helps me make touching turns all the way down the shank because I want to keep this body fairly smooth. Makes it a lot easier to wrap the tinsel when we do this. Now I wrap this right down, and I like the curve shape that you get with these when they make that. The bend actually starts about where the point is with these 200R hooks. So, but I'm going to wrap this right down to where the barb used to be. By the way, I did take the barb off. The back end of the fly is red holographic tinsel. It comes on this small size spool. So once again, no thread keeper or spool keeper on this one because I don't have ones that small. And I gotta find the little notch that I cut in the edge of the spool to hold that. I'll cut that piece off. Now to tie this in, right, if you want to keep everything perfect, oh, that just went on the floor. Oh well, where'd it go? Well, I'll try again. I'll find it later. Somewhere. Where'd it go here? There we are. That's the problem with this holographic tinsel. It does kink a little bit. So it tends to keep its shape until you actually get it onto the fly. All right, so I'll get a piece of that. And what I will do with this is I'm going to hold the tip of this so it sticks down below the hook shank, and I will make a right where the wire ends. I'm going to make a down below. I'm going to leave a little tag. I'll make a couple of wraps and snug the tag up by pulling on the tinsel just a little bit. I'm going to take that tip of the tinsel and I'm going to bend it backwards on the hook shank. And then I will wrap over top of that doubled up stuff right back to where I tied the wire in. And the reason for the tipping that tip back is that I've had the tinsel pull out several times when you're halfway through the fly, and that's no fun because you got to start over. I'll take my thread right up, and again, I'm going to try and keep it fairly smooth. I'm going to take my thread right, right up the hook shank to behind the bead. And there, I'll do a quick half hitch behind the bead to keep my thread nice and steady. Get my bobbin rest. Grab my hackle pliers and hold the end of the tinsel with my hackle pliers. Leave the wire behind. And then just use my rotary vise to wrap this red tinsel all the way up in touching turns, all the way up the hook shank, so that I don't have the black showing through, just the tinsel. And I'll wrap it all the way up the hook shank. Keep a nice, reasonably smooth body here. And when I get to where the bead is, I'll hold that up, take my thread and put it over top a couple of times. Pull the tinsel back. And do a couple of wraps. And make sure that I've got that sucker tied down so it's not going to unravel on me. Yeah, I got a little tag end there again. I'm just going to flatten that out and right on top of it. That way that's not going to come unraveled either. Now I'll take the green holographic tinsel. I'll take a length of that. And where are we here? I need to mark where these little notches I cut in the spools are. Once again, I'll do the same thing as I did with the red, but I'm going to start right behind the eye. And I will make a, leave the tinsel stick out a little bit again, and wrap a couple of wraps. Oops, missed it. Again, right behind the bead. And I'll do a couple of wraps. And then pull that tag end back again. And tie it down. Just trim the little bit off that sticks out. Again, that's not going to come undone. I won't be able to pull loose. I do a quick half hitch again behind the bead. And once again, I'll take my hackle pliers and grab the tinsel. And so what I'm going to do from here, I'm going to wrap towards the back with the green holographic tinsel, touching turns all the way back. And the reason I'm doing this rather than stopping partway down the nymph and with the red, instead winding it all the way up, is it makes for a much smoother body. And then by taking the green and starting it behind the bead, wrapping it back to where I want to cut it off with the red, by doing that, the transition between the red and the green is smoother, and the green is a little bit thicker than what the red is when it's on the shank of the hook. And that gives just a teeny bit of taper to the body of the fly. When I get to the front, I'll do the same as I did before. Hold the tinsel up. Tinsel up, wrap it behind the bead. 1, 2, pull the tinsel back, couple of wraps, and trim it off. Don't need to be too neat behind the bead because it's going to, and I don't need to, because I'm going to wrap the wire with my hand, I don't need to do a half hitch this time. I'll take the wire and I will counter wrap. I'm going to wrap counterclockwise to the way I did the tinsel. I'm wrapping it the opposite direction. That helps protect the tinsel from fish teeth, causing it to unravel. When I get behind the bead, I'll just hold it up there, do a couple of wraps behind, couple of wraps in front, and then I don't need to trim it off. I'll just take my fingernails and close in and just go round and round and round and round and round, and it will at some point break. There, it'll break itself off. And the last little bit is Peacock Herl, and I'm going to take 2 strands here. 2 strands, and I want to use the fairly fuzzy part, not the tips, or the butts are really quite thick, so I'm going to cut the butts off a bit. Use the fuzzier part of that Herl. And the same thing here, I'm going to wrap over top of those butts. 1, 2, pull the tips back so I don't have to cut them off. Just wrap them in so they won't pull out after I pull them back. I'll hold the thread and the Peacock Herl straight out from the hook, and I'll make a couple of clockwise wraps around the thread. And then we will wrap the Peacock Herl around behind the bead. And I want it to be maybe a little wider than the bead, the Peacock Herl. And I want a good thick thorax. When I get to the size I want and location I want, I will hold the Peacock Herl up. Again, wraps in behind, right behind the bead. Wraps in front. Don't want that to unravel on me. Take my scissors and slide it right down the Peacock Herl and trim it off. Then the whip finisher. And right behind the bead. Do a whip finish. And just to be safe, I'll do another. Trim my thread. Now, if you want to be a belt and suspenders person, and you think that you might want this to be a little more durable, I'll take some Sally Hansen's hard as nails racker and just dab a little bit on where the tinsel is. Not too much. I just want to just get a little on there to make it nice and smooth. And then rotate the vise a little bit while it sets. So, and there's just a little bibble there. And rotate the vise a little bit while it sets. And that's it. That's all there is to it. So I'm going to de-spotlight me. There you go. Any questions?
It's certainly a
That was very
dynamite
thorough.
line.
What's that?
It works like a hot dam too.
Yeah, yeah, very, very effective fly.
Do you only
The only
use it in
thing I would
December,
do
Dave?
differently from you is tie a bunch of bodies before putting the Peacock Herl and varnishing them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
because with the Sally Hansons, I'm always getting stuff all over the place. So I can never keep that Peacock Herl clean.
well, I just don't let it. I don't get anywhere near it. Tends you leave your brush about here, it tends to suck up there. So
Yeah, okay.
I just
So
don't
maybe
go too
you
close
should-
to your peacock girl.
Maybe you should practice on your wife's nails. Florin?
Yeah, right. As if I as if I didn't care for my life. Actually, guys, I just realized I don't have my tying shirt on, so I need a proper background here. I'll be back in just a few seconds.
So the actual Doc's actual name is Mike Monteith, and he used to be he used to run a bar in Edmonton, and that folded during the pandemic, I think, and he now works for a flooring company. He has a flooring company, does flooring for houses, and he also does DJ work on weekends and in evenings, because he did the DJ work in his bar out on Stony Plain Road. But yeah, so he showed us how to tie this, and like I say, I learned how to fish a washing line with him, which is a lot more difficult to do here, because you can't have more than one hook on a line. There is a way of doing it using floating things that don't have hooks in them. But if you're fishing for backswimmers in the fall in Alberta, the washing line is absolutely deadly. Okay, Lauren's on.
Dave, I'm trying to focus this thing here a little bit. Change the lights. Okay, so I don't know if any of you spend any time listening to the radio around Christmas time and you cannot escape Christmas carols. And one of them starts with a classic line, "My true love gave to me a partridge in a pear tree." And I was thinking flies, Christmas, partridges. By the time I got to partridge, I was like, yeah, I know what I'm gonna do for a Christmas fly. So I did a few experiments trying to keep the red and green theme, and all of it kind of started off the fact that I do happen to have bought many, many years ago a partridge skin dyed olive. Yep. So you can do the same thing with whatever partridge feathers you have. Now, when you take a partridge skin and you look at all the bits, typically we do, the traditional wet fly patterns with the feathers that are around the neck of the partridge. Those are the finest and smallest. Typically we worry about tying, tiny little spiders, 14, 16s, and we never find feathers that are small enough. This guy has like really nice feathers up here. Now for something this size, this is a size 12 hook from, this is actually a trout bum hook. It's a little bit longer shank than sort of standard wet fly. White gape, strong wire, so I wouldn't be afraid of taking this to seriously big fish. And then you have bigger feathers on a partridge that we typically ignore when we tie wet flies, around the rump, around the sides of the bird. And here, these are the most valuable feathers on the partridge in some respect. These are the tail feathers. You can tie some beautiful classic wet flies with these tail feathers. Big, long, stronger fibers, very well marked. Okay. So here I'm going to do something that only uses the very soft hackles from the Partridge. And oh, by the way, there's also stuff that's very much marabou-like. So all this fluff towards the base of the feathers, if you feel like having something really, really soft in your pattern, you can use those, or you can go, again, you can go on the body and you've got, you know, real Partridge marabou in various corners. You just have to go looking for it. Okay, so let's start the pattern here, put a hook in the vise. These are barbless, so I don't have to worry about the barbing. And I'm just going to use standard 8/0 uni thread for this. This way I don't have to worry about building up too much bulk, although this is a, you know, it's a fairly large hook, but there are many, many steps and many wraps of thread. So there we go. Okay, so build a thread base towards the bend of the hook. And with these kinds of hooks, they're very nice hooks. They have extremely sharp points and they're pointing slightly upward. And I can speak from experience that they do cut the thread very efficiently. So watch your step around these things because they're very, very sharp. Okay, now I want to build a tail. And what am I going to do for a tail? Well, again, it depends on what effect you're searching for. So I'm going to first, you know, you may put some flash or not. And I thought, nah, this is a Christmas fly, so you can't go wrong with some extra flash. So I have a spool of this holo shimmer thread. I like to use it off a spool like this because you can do all sorts of things, including just tying bodies straight up. And I'm going to go a few turns forward and use this little dubbing hook to build myself a few strands, you know, depending on how much flash you want. Oops, I went too far, sorry. The idea is to lock this in place with a turn. And then this will give me 2 strands on each side of the hook. And if I want 3, I go one more time. Like this, then pull back. Sliding, forgot to lock it in. I'm making a mess of it. Okay, let's try again. 1, 2, 3. Then a wrap down here to lock it. It's not working on me today. And that last, I wanted to avoid going behind, but I guess I can't do that. So it's slippery this morning. Let's do this. I could have done it the other way a lot easier. I'm doing this to save time. I'm not saving any time now. Oh well. So this is my little bit of flash here. I just slide the scissors in and cut it. I got it a little short. Okay, so this gives a little bit of flash here. And this one I'm just gonna get out of the way. Now Partridge. Okay, let's see what I'm gonna use for Partridge. So if you want the very soft stuff, you need a fair quantity of it because just like marabou, this is fine stuff. It's actually even finer than regular turkey marabou. So I'll take this feather and I'll just grab all of the fluff of it and try to keep it reasonably well aligned. Let's see. Does it work? Okay, so I've got a little clump. You can always pinch the ends of this. So if it's a little bit longer, not a problem, that can be fixed. Okay, so put it on top of the hook, do a few loose wraps going forward. I don't mind a little bit of an underbody here. So I'm just not going to even trim that front, just go. And then I properly secure it when I go backwards. So when I go forwards, I just do fairly loose thread wraps just to keep things on the hook, but without twisting it around the hook. And then here you can, for pinching, you just put it between your thumb and forefinger, and just with your nail, you can pinch it a little bit. So you have a little flash at the base of all of this, and then you've got the marabou, partridge marabou. The next thing is going to go on here is a bit of a rib. And same thing as Dave did earlier, in order to keep the body nice, you leave a little bit of a tag here. I'm tying this on my side. So this way I avoid having ugly bumps on the body. Okay, so go to the front and stick this onto the vise for later use. Okay. Then I'm going to use the main material for the body, which is red silk. This is red silk from the sewing shop, and it went on an old empty spool. So I know this is not, I know this is the good stuff because it says olive done here, right? So yeah, this is not olive done, right? And again, in order to keep the body nice, same thing as you do with tinsels and other things, you just tie them at the front and wrap. Hey, what are you doing here? Okay, so technical issues, it seems like. I was tying one size larger a little bit earlier, and because of that, my vise is a little loose. Should too many things dangling. So let's see. Where was I at? Yes, I was wrapping the silk. Just going backwards here. And all the way to where the tail starts. This is important so you don't get ugly things back there. And then move the thread forward, and if there's anything else that's likely to stick out, now's the time to clean it before you put the thread on. Okay. So now either use the rotary vise, or this being on a bobbin, it's fairly easy to wrap. Floss would be even nicer. If I had something thicker, would be even better, because it would make a much quicker job of this. Or you can, you know, if you want to do it faster, you can go, but in the end, it almost probably takes the same amount of time. You can go, rather than trying to get your turns touching nicely, which I'm trying to do here. I'm not sure how well I'm succeeding. You can just wrap a couple of times, in which case you want to start wrapping from the front to the back and then go back over it one more time. This is going to be enough because I need also a little room here for a thorax and the head. And the other advantage of putting the silk in a bobbin like this is that the silk fibers are reasonably fragile, and you get a little bit of fraying on the thread. And ooh, this is no good. Why didn't anybody say anything? This is not a covered shank. Ooh. Never tie on camera because you.
So Florin, that's the advantage of using floss.
Yes, I know, but I have all kinds of materials. Silk floss is not one of those.
Yeah, I like the acetate floss, and if you get a spool of 4-strand stuff, it's easier to do it if you actually take a length of it off and split it out, so you only have to deal with 2 strands. Then it doesn't fray as much.
Yeah, that's what I do. I use the actually I use the other the Danville not the acetate. What's the other one? The regular
The regular
regular
floss. Yeah.
floss. And with that one, I do exactly as you say. I take a spool of that stuff, and if I have the patience, I unravel the whole thing. Or
Yeah.
if I use embroidery floss, I take a hank of that, and
Yeah.
I split it in two. Because 2 strands seems to be, like you say, you know, the most
Yeah.
the most
And the other
useful.
thing with embroidery floss is that the embroidery floss is twisted a little bit, so it doesn't fray much at all.
Yeah.
If you're using
Yeah,
the
and if
acetate
you
stuff,
and the other thing is the trick I mentioned earlier, which is for handling these things with the least amount of fraying and stuff.
Yeah.
Just put them on a spool them up, put them in a bobbin holder, and they'll get less, you know, rubbing between your fingers, and less fraying as a consequence. Okay, so ribbing with the this is stuff that's kind of similar to the tinsel of old times. This is a flat wire, and it comes out pretty nice. I like the effect of it. I'm going to put a throat and a wing on this. So for the throat, I'm going to turn this upside down, and I'm going to use some fibers from, I kept here a well-marked tip of a rump feather. And this is a little bit too much. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to decide how much fiber do I need for that throat. And I'm going to use the same technique for the wing. So it's kind of it's a useful technique to learn. And for me, it eliminated a lot of pain when it came to doing throats and wings with soft hackle. So what I do is I pull back the fibers, and this is the portion that I'm going to be using. And then I cut off the tip of the feather. Okay. Now, this is going to work better if you left the stem here. But this came off a feather I used for something else, so stem is gone. So what I'll do is I'll grab it somehow by that end. Hackle pliers work, for example, like this. And then just stroke these fibers back. Okay. Once I've done that, I'm going to take this clump of fibers. They're still attached to a piece of stem. I'm going to put it down here. And I'm just going to do a light wrap. Just basically put a thread, one turn over. This is barely just holding this in place. And then with my hand that's on the front side of the hook, just going to gently pull on these fibers until I get to the length that I desire. Okay, and that's my throat. Now, of course, I forgot something important, so I'm going to go back. Sorry. It doesn't seem to be my morning. I need a little bit of a thorax here, and for that purpose, I'm going to use some Peacock Herl. So as you can see, pretty similar ingredients to what Dave was doing. I guess that's what happens if you want to do red and green. I'm going to take 3 strands. This is pretty fine stuff. And I'm going to cut these fragile tips. They always break off. And tie them in place here. So I'm about 3 or 4 eye lengths behind the eye. I'm going to just hand wrap these things here, build a tiny little bit of thorax. And what this will do for me is going to help with the throat of the fly. It's going to stand those fibers when I tie them on. Because now I have a nice bump to pull that throat against. So again, 3-4 turns in front, secure this, cut it off. And again, turn the hook to where we were before. Now, we restart the process with the throat. Again, here, there's a darker side to this feather and there's lighter side, and I want to keep the darker side facing out because it looks better. I don't think it matters at all as far as fishing goes. And then keep this in place as well as you can. Now a ring eye hook probably would have been better for this because it's a lot easier to work. You don't have the eye of the hook getting in the way. So here, for better control, you may want to use both hands. So pull with one hand and hold the fibers a little bit with the other hand. And when this looks okay, or even good, just pinch it down a little bit and give it a few turns of thread nice and tight to secure it in place. And sneak your scissors in there as close as you can and cut. So now you've got the throat, and we're going to go for wing. Now for the wing, I'm going to do the exact same thing, and you're going to see what generates that hackle tip that I used previously. So I'm looking at the length here of the fibers, make sure that they're long enough for a wing, and they are. You basically want to go about halfway down the tail of the fly. And this is, again, fairly fine stuff, so you can use a fair size segment of feather. So let's see. This is probably going to be enough. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the fibers back. These are the ones I'm going to use. And then I have this feather tip left, which I'm going to cut off. Okay. Smooth these fibers back to where they are in their normal position. And there's something that's a little asymmetric here at the front. Now is the time to clean it off. This will ensure that, you know, your wing is going to come as symmetric as possible. You may use a little bit of water or something and just make these stick together a little bit more. And the other thing to pay attention to here is you want the thread to be not at the eye of the hook, but a little bit behind, so you have room to tie the feather down. So lay this on top. Now we have the stem. And if you can do 2 but very, very light wraps so that you can see here my feathers turned and everything. So I'm going to lift, whoa, it went all the way. Okay, back to where we were. I went on the bare stem, which was a bad idea. I want to have a little bit of fiber there. Just a little bit there. And then, as before, just pull on the stem one side and hold on to it from the other side. And pull, pull, pull. And now you're at the point where you should be starting to have a nice looking wing. Let's see. lengthwise. The measurement is right. Hold it and secure with a few turns of thread. Then trim this. This is pretty thick here, so go at the base of your blades so you don't ruin the tips. And what's left, of course, is just garbage. And now just smooth this over, do a few hiding wraps here. Build a little bit of a head. And here we are.
Oh, we've got 3 hummingbirds today. Oh, and 2 feeding at the same time.
Without fighting.
Just not sure where they're going, eh? It's so
Okay, so a couple of whip finishes. And there is your fly. It's got the red and the green. And it's built on standard wet fly ideas. And I'm sure there is a pattern named something else out there that looks exactly like this. Yeah, as I like to say, you know, for a long while now, there haven't been any new ideas in fly tying.
I
And
really like the way you put the throat and the wing in there, Florin, because I'm used to doing those kind of things just by stripping feathers off and then bunching them up and putting them on, which makes it a little harder to adjust the proper length.
well, the collective credit, again, this is not a new idea and it's definitely not mine. The collective credit here goes to Wally Lutz and Paul Jorgensen.
Yeah.
And it was during a fly tying demo that where I was struggling with mallard wings.
Mm.
That Wally came to the rescue and said, you know, in Paul Jorgensen's book on fly tying for Atlantic salmon flies, here's how you can do some of these things nice and easy. And he was I don't have the book, so he took some, he had some pictures out of the book and he emailed them to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I went like, ooh, I wish I'd thought of that. And ever since, you know, everything I do with soft fibers for wings and throats, it all started with tying, what was I tying? I was tying something with mallard flank. You know, you have a lot of patterns
Yeah.
where the mallard flank is important, either as a wing or as an underwing or whatever, right? So a lot of the streamers for
A lot easier than cutting 2 slips out of a mallard flank and then trying to marry them together and tie them on.
God, no, absolutely. This is it's absolute. The only thing you have to pay attention to is looking for a feather that's reasonably symmetric.
Symmetric, yeah.
And actually, I think the Jorgensen pictures that Wally sent me had used some guinea feathers.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, this is the wing. So here
Yeah.
I'm using red. So it's again another kind of Peacock Christmas thing, right? So red hackle from a hen.
Yeah.
You've seen those red hens run around, right? And then some dyed red
Golden pheasant crest, yeah.
No, this is another great source of stuff.
Yeah.
This is guinea fowl dyed red.
Yeah.
And then this is the crest, yeah, the dyed red.
Dyed pheasant crest.
Crest, right? So again, this is a combo of, I was looking at this and like, Yeah, this looks like many things that I've tried over the years. So yeah, but it didn't have Partridge, so I didn't and I did some versions. You can do, here's another version. This
Well,
is just like a,
the business of stroking the fibers back on the Partridge and having the tip out there, I never thought of taking the tip off like that, because the past I've used that technique and tied the feather in with the tip intact, and then once you've got it tied in with the tip down and then you cut the tip off, then you can do a folded hackle, and that's how a lot of those English spider patterns are tied. So maybe one of these days we'll do a one of those
I'll
spider
have to call you
patterns.
back. I just did a video conference.
An interesting situation. I have two complete pheasant skins, the golden and I forget what the other one's
Ringneck.
called. And I seldom, if ever, use anything from it because
oh,
most of the flies we tie don't use pheasant.
oh no, here's Michael Dell can tell you dirty tricks with sorry Michael, putting you on the spot here, but the